Hello, my friends, and welcome to a brand new episode of Discourse in Magic. My name is Jonah, and in this episode, we sit down with the one and only Benjamin Barnes. Benjamin is an absolute staple in the Chicago Magic community with direct ties to Eugene Berger, a huge hand in the recurring show Chicago Magic, and now the entertainment director of the Chicago Magic Lounge. Ben Barnes not only exemplifies Chicago, but also has seen it all. This was an incredible episode with an incredible magician. I think you are going to learn a lot and love it as much as I did. Here it is, the one and only Benjamin Barnes. Benjamin Barnes, how are you?
I am doing really great, Jonah. Thank you for having me.
I am so excited to have you, and from what I can see, live from the Chicago Magic Lounge nonetheless. Is that true? That's where you are, right?
Yeah, that's true. I'm in the 654 Club here at the Chicago Magic Lounge, which is our formal close-up theater. And we have a show tonight and all kinds of things going on tonight. So, yep.
Oh my goodness. Well, I'm very excited to chat about the lounge, but I would like to maybe even chronologically get to the lounge and how it even came to be. Why don't we get started with you and how you even got started in magic? How did you find magic?
I found magic really, really young. I was in preschool and a magician came to my preschool and, I'm maybe 4 or 5 years old. So I don't really even understand what it is I'm watching, but I did understand that it was for me. And so as soon as I was old enough to be able to ask for a magic book or a magic set, I did. And I was very lucky. And then as I got a little bit older, I discovered the Yellow Pages, which you may not have even seen before, John.
I have seen Yellow Pages. I'm old enough to. Mostly I sat on them to be taller, but I have seen them.
Exactly. Well, back in the days before the internet and smartphones, that's all you had. And I looked up magic in magic shops in the Yellow Pages, and I just literally went down the line. And I met a few cool people who gave me time. Jay Marshall was one of those people. He had a magic shop that still exists, and he invited me down to the magic shop. I went there maybe twice when I was a kid, and from that moment on, almost everything was mail order. So my introduction to the magic world was pretty small. Basically, people I had seen on television, David Copperfield, Stephen Roy every once in a while. And when I was 19 and I was in college, I met my first magician who was also my same age. And through that person, I was introduced to Genie magazine. And that's when I really discovered how vast the world of magic was with conventions and all these different clubs. And I began to learn more about the Magic Castle. And
were you in Chicago this whole time or no?
The whole time. But you know what, depending on where you grow up, you don't get to experience the world of magic. Most of the magic world in Chicago that you've heard about is on the north side of the city. I literally grew up on the other side of town, on the south side, and it might as well have been in Toronto.
Wow.
Until I got out of college and I was able to begin driving myself to the magic shops and magic clubs. But even prior to that, I was 19 years old, I was about to graduate from college, and I wanted to be involved with magic. I wanted to be a magician. So I found a way to call all of these magicians to get advice. I called people like Don Wayne. I don't know if you know Don Wayne. Chris Keener was one of the people. I called Tina Leonard, Chris Hart, and eventually I saw Jeff McBride on television, World's Greatest Magic. But I didn't know him. And I figured, where does Jeff McBride live? And I said, well, he's a magician. He has to live in Las Vegas. So I called directory assistants in Las Vegas, asked for Jeff McBride. They gave me his phone number.
Wow.
I called Jeff McBride's house. His wife answered the phone and said, listen, he's in Atlantic City doing shows. Here's the phone number to the hotel. I called the hotel. I talked to Jeff for about 15, 20 minutes. He says, where do you live? And I said, Chicago. He says, well, if you live in Chicago, you have to take lessons with Eugene Berger, who is also in Atlantic City with me, but he's asleep. So he can't talk to you right now. But here's his number. Call him, and I'm sure he would love to meet you.
What a way into magic. Oh my gosh. That is incredible. So a couple questions about it. The first thing is, when you were at college, did you think about magic as a profession? Did you think of how did you even think about doing magic when you were there? And how did you decide to take magic seriously? Were you performing a lot, or were you just learning from magicians because you like to study? What was going on there?
I wasn't learning from magicians, but when you're in college, one of the things that you learn is that lots of people know one or two magic tricks. You know what I mean? So I was at parties, I would always meet that guy who knew two card tricks. And again, this was before the internet, so there's no YouTube, anything like that. While I was in college, a magic shop opened in the small town where I went to school. And I bought Boble's Modern Coin Magic, and I bought the Vernon trilogy, The Lost Inner Secrets. And keep in mind, I knew nothing about magic really at that time. So I opened this Vernon book. I can't do any of this, zero. I almost gave up. And but yeah, I would buy, the tricks I had is now the mail order. I had my zombie ball. I had the Linky rings. I knew a couple of card tricks that I learned from people at parties. And I didn't think of magic as a career in the same way that I think about it now. I didn't know that people did walk around shows. I didn't know people did trade show magic or restaurant magic. I just knew you could be famous. So I saw David Copperfield. I saw Lance Bird, Siegfried Roy. I thought that was what you shot for. I didn't know there was a whole world in between of people, performing at sales meetings. I had no idea. And so when I was about to leave school, I was trying to connect with people who I thought could help me get into that realm of magic, sort of the upper echelon, which is why I was calling Chris Kenner of all people. And like I said, Don Wayne and Tina Leonard. I was calling the people that we all idolize as magicians, because I thought that was the only option. I had no idea I could do magic at trade shows. It didn't occur to me. I thought you were either famous or it was just a hobby.
And how did that sort of progress for you? I mean, before we start talking about, or maybe it has to do with chatting with Eugene Berger and sort of, finding the whole other part of the Chicago community. But how did you start thinking about performing like that, at events and things like that?
Well, it had everything to do with Eugene Berger. I went to Eugene Berger's home. He invited me to his home. And I had never heard of Eugene Berger. And at this time, Eugene Berger was Eugene Berger. I had no idea. Again, I had not seen Genie magazine. I was so disconnected from magic. Unless you were a real celebrity in the world of magic, I had never heard of you. So I went to Eugene's house. I saw him, and he said, "Show me some of your magic." And I thought it was ridiculous. I was like, this old man has nothing to teach me. How old are you? And, within 5 minutes, I instantly knew I knew nothing. He made it real clear to me. But one of the things he taught me was that the acts that magicians are doing for competitions and in magic clubs don't really prepare you for professional work in the real world. And Eugene was the first, because Eugene was, he was performing at conventions and writing books and lecturing at magicians clubs. Well, Eugene was working for the public at this time, nightly. He had a couple of restaurants, but he was also doing private parties. He was doing the occasional speaking engagement. So the way he instructed me in magic was with the intention of sending me out in the world to do professional work in the places that magicians do. So walk around magic, restaurants, all of that. That's where Eugene sort of pointed me in that direction.
Talk to me a little bit about that, that Chicago community that you discovered. I think that a lot of places in the world, we hear about that Chicago magic has its own style, and to an extent, I understand, it's sort of close up, there's a couple other features to it, but what really does Chicago magic mean? What is that style? What makes something so obviously Chicago or Chicago inspired or whatever? What is that?
Yeah. Well, the Chicago magic scene that I came into as a very young person in their early 20s, 2021, is not the magic scene that exists today. The magic, yeah, it's so different from what it used to be. It's almost unrecognizable. But the world that I came into that was inhabited by people like Simon Harrison and David Solomon and Eugene and John Bannon, people like that. It was largely close up, predominantly card magic. And in the case of most people who are working in these bars and restaurants, very quick tricks, not overly presentational, funny. Comedy was a big part of it. And then, Eugene came around and Eugene added a theatricality that was still accessible to lay people. It wasn't over the top in the way that people sometimes think of Eugene. Eugene was very commercial in his approach to magic. But Eugene also, there came a point when he began to study stage magic at the urging of Jeff McBride and with the assistance of people like Max Maven. So Eugene, once he got into stand-up magic, and Eugene was I almost called him the guru, but he sort of was. People followed Eugene. So when Eugene had this shift towards stage magic, suddenly magicians at large in Chicago began to make that shift. And the style of stage magic that Eugene sort of pioneered in the city is still with us today. So very practical, an entire show in an envelope or a small bag. That approach to magic is still with us today. And also Eugene inspired magicians to become more presentational. So people still do comedy magic, but they also have other approaches to it that I think are really interesting.
We're talking quite a bit about Eugene, and his philosophies have affected me, because I've read his works, I've got a chance to meet him, spend a little bit of time with him. But I can imagine in Chicago and also spending time with him directly, some of his philosophies and some of his theories and stuff are really clear there. They maybe even run through the veins of the city. What are some of the messages or some of the thoughts or some of the ideas of Eugene's that you think are still really resonant right now in Chicago, or at the very least that you think magicians from all over the world might, should start thinking about?
If I had to pick something that I see really prevalent in Chicago, is magicians here have scripts for their magic. They really do. Scripting is a big part of what we do here. There's so many opportunities to work as a magician here that practicality is a huge part of how you select material and how you perform. I think the biggest one is community. The most important thing Eugene taught me, I believe, was how to be a good citizen within the magic community here. I've been to a lot of places in magic. In Chicago, there is zero competition. Magicians here don't look at each other as competition. It's very cooperative, collaborative, and that's the big thing that I think Eugene left us all with. Because Eugene, if you liked magic, you didn't have to be good at it. But if you liked magic and you took it seriously, you could hang out with him. That was like the thing. You could stink at it. It didn't matter. If you loved magic, Eugene would give you his time. And that relationship he had with other people inspired how they relate to one another.
I think it's a great feature of all magic communities. We should all seek to embody that. If you like magic, come be a part of this. Come learn, come be a part of this community. You don't have to be the best to be a part of the community. I really like that message. I want to hear a little bit about the show that you helped put on for a long time that I think was somewhat of a precursor to the Chicago Magic Lounge, which was Magic Chicago. Can you tell me a little bit about that? What was that era like? What was that show like? Can you tell us about what that was?
So Magic Chicago began in June of 2005. And the catalyst for the creation of this show, Eugene, he had two students, a gentleman named Robert Charles and another named P.T. Murphy. And they were complaining that there was nowhere in the city where you could get up and do magic and get better at it. So Eugene said, well, why don't you start a show? And Patrick, in particular, had a background in theater. So he had connection to small theaters in the city. And he and Robert found a theater. And then Eugene suggested to them that they involve me. So the three of us, we started the show. Within the first 6 months, Patrick left the show. He wanted to do other things. So it was Robert and myself. In order to fill his space, we would bring in guest magicians. So December of that year, local magicians, we brought in Arthur Trace, for example, who many people will know, Eugene Berger, who lived in Chicago, David Kovac, who used to live here. And we did the show for almost 13 years. We did it for 12 years. Yeah, a long time. We were the longest running magic show in the history of the city. And in that time, I was able to go from performing in Chicago to, I started working the Magic Castle a lot. I would work the castle at least once a year for the last 10 years of that show. And I would go to California and I would meet people and I would say, if you ever want to come to Chicago, you should do Magic Chicago. So Rob Zabrecki would come over, John Armstrong, Suzanne, Tina Leonard, Mike Caveney, it's amazing. And when I look back on how I convinced these people to come to Chicago to this dumpy theater to perform, it blows my mind. Jared Koff, everyone, Paul V. Hill, all the people many of them came and they did the show. And at the end of the 12 years, and we were the only show in town, I should mention. So we're like the big show where if you love magic and you're a magician, you could come see people you typically won't go to the convention. We were the place where you could come see them.
And was it monthly, weekly? What was it?
It was monthly.
Monthly, cool.
And sometimes, depending on the time of year, we would do multiple shows in a month. Halloween, we do multiple shows. Max Mabel produced his show several times in a month. So it depends on when we thought we could sell tickets, because I never promised the performers who came to perform that they would make, like I said, I have no money, none. But all the ticket sales, any profit we make from ticket sales, yours. So once we sold, and we sold out, we did really well. So we sell out, pay our bills, and we still have $1,300.
Yeah, it's good.
So in a night, and the magicians came to do the show, they came because it was fun. They didn't come because it was a big check, but to make $1,000 for performing for 40 minutes, it was nice.
Yeah.
It was nice. And we would hang out, and we always had these big parties. Danny and Jen Orleans had this beautiful home in Lincoln Park, and they would open the home up. We'd have these catered affairs and just have a great time. It was wonderful.
It sounds a lot like what we do when we produce shows here in Toronto. Like the secret that you've already just exposed is that magicians will be willing to come be a part of something that may not promise a big pay if you've got a great community and great people and good fun and an awesome space to be in, or at least it's electric. That they like being there, and you'd be surprised who would agree to come perform in your space for a situation like that. Before we talk a little bit about the lounge, what did you learn from putting on that experience for 13 years? Was there any messages or any big things that you think magicians could benefit from? Like, what take homes did you get from putting together a show like that for so long?
What I think I learned first and foremost was I began to really understand what the lay public, I feel I understand anyway, what the lay public is hoping to experience when they come to a magic show. And I've learned what type of acts are pleasing to people who aren't magicians. At the Magic Lounge, our audience is 99.9% lay people, many of whom have never seen magic before. And when I look at acts who perform here, I have to think, what would satisfy these people who don't care about methods or don't care about your name? There's a lot of people walking around this planet who think they're famous magicians because they've been on Genie magazine. no one knows who you are.
1,000%. There's a comedy club. There's a comedy club that we work with, and we were asking him about, oh, does this name bring out people? Does that name bring out people? He said a couple of years ago, just to prove that no names bring out anyone, he filled the bill with just people who were in the obituary that week. Like he just found some names of random dead people, and he just said that they were the ones on the lineup. And he said the tickets were exactly the same as they were every other week. He said nobody cared. Nobody came. People just came to see a comedy show. And it's very similar with magic. Magicians think that their name is all the fame in the world, but really it's more binary. Yes, no, is the act commercial or is it not commercial? And if so, they'll have a good time when they're here. And if not, then maybe they won't.
No, people are coming because there's magic. And a lot of times I think too, lay people, because so few people see magic live, that they don't even know what magic means. They have an impression of what they think it means. Maybe they saw David Copperfield or David Blaine. But when people step into our theater, and I imagine this is the same most places, they really don't know what they're in for yet. And my job and all of our jobs, anyone who performs before the public, is to create this experience that not only will people be entertained by, but will hopefully want to experience again. We want to make people fall in love with magic when they come here so that they keep coming back and they bring friends and all of that.
All of this information we're talking about, Magic Chicago, all of these lessons are things that you are now using, to some extent as the entertainment director at the Chicago Magic Lounge. And I'd love to hear about, maybe there's a lot of magicians at home who are wondering, how can I go perform there? What does it take? What does it take? What do the audiences want to see? What do you want to see? You're deciding who makes it and who doesn't. What do you want to see to decide if an act is good enough to perform there?
Couple of things. I'm looking for performers who are singular in the world. So there's so many people, all these videos I see doing the same things in the same way. And it's not that that's the only way they can do those things. It's that they haven't really done the work to discover what's special about them. I would encourage, once you start doing that, you automatically start to feel more original. It's more special. And it's really just you. So I look for people who have their own point of view, their own spin on things. Hopefully, they've done it enough times that their act just has the polish that comes from doing it. Experience is a great teacher, maybe the best teacher. An experienced act that is unlike any other is very attractive to someone in my position. And lastly, someone who can get along with the staff and the other magicians. There have been magicians here who cannot just play well with others, and that's just as important as the show, believe me. I would rather take a pretty good magician who is pleasant to be around than a great magician who people can't stand, if I had to.
There's some really clear advice here. The first is a point of view. And usually I love the way you said something like, not originality, but it was something like that, like uniqueness. Like you understand when you look at someone, you understand their style, their way of doing things. I think that's a really good one. The second one is that you are polished. The thing that comes to mind is you tell people down to the minute how long the act is that they're doing, right? They need to know exactly down to the minute how long their act is. And if they need to do 24 minutes, that's different than 28 minutes. Like those are two completely different things. It's not 20-ish minutes. It's, exactly down to the moment what the act is. And then the last is making sure that you are fun to be around and fun to, be a part of the community. There's magicians, there's lay people, there's servers, there's staff, there's a community there that you are a guest in. And just like when you work with, your best clients and you're acting, like you should be respectfully, as a great member of a community, you should be doing the same thing when you're there. Those are very good and very practical.
Yeah, just good manners. You know, good manners, like your mom taught you when you were a kid.
Yeah, exactly.
That's it. Please, thank you, hello. You know, that's it goes a long way.
You know, on the other side of the same coin, not just asking about what it takes to perform there, but you've seen a lot of acts there, and you've seen maybe the acts themselves either work or not work in the space, or, you know, looking at, you know, not what it takes to get there, but what are some of the most successful acts in that space really doing? What are the things that really pushes the people above and beyond that you keep wanting to bring back, or that are real highlights of the community, or real highlights of Chicago? What are they doing right to be, you know, the stars of the show?
Number one thing is they are being themselves. They feel authentic. When people see them, they believe that the person they're watching is who they present themselves to be. And then the other star quality, for lack of a better word, is the ability to connect with the audience. You know, the audience doesn't want to be talked at or performed at, but they want to become a part of the performance, even if that's just acknowledging their energy. Like if the audience laughs at something or they show amazement, just they want to know that the person on stage is connected to them. You know, the best example of that, I think, is Canada's own Carissa Hendricks, performing Lucy Darling. She does so much work with the audience. She could almost not do magic.
Yeah.
You know, she could just sort of talk.
Yeah.
And that could be the show. But yeah, the best acts I've seen, another great Canadian, Mark Clearview, was just here.
Yeah. Good friend of ours.
Same thing. He barely is doing magic, but there's so much connection with the audience interaction that the audience, I really believe the audience does not care. I won't say they don't care about the tricks, but on the list of priorities, when they go see a magic show, the magic trick is a lot lower on the list than you might expect if the other parts of the performance are strong.
You know, I think that's a message that people should take home, which is a scary thing to hear as magicians. You know, it's a scary thing to hear that the thing that we have all of our books about and the thing that we're worrying so much about is really like, I don't know, a quarter, a third of what we really have to do when we're up there. Like, really what we got to do is give them a good time, entertain, be active, you know, like be engaging, be responsive, you know, like that's so much more than the trick, you know?
Yeah. If you can do all those things and then you have something to say. And if magic is just the means through which you communicate all of those other things, you can do anything. You know, you could do anything. You could do the trick where you stick the ruler to your hand, and you know, it still work. You know.
You mentioned earlier that, you know, the Chicago magic back then is very different than Chicago magic now. What is Chicago magic now? What is that representative of when someone talks about what the Chicago magic scene is right now?
Sure. I think what it's representative of now, and this is largely due to the fact that there's a venue where people can work all the time. I've often said that the Magic Castle is great, not because, you know, the people there are the greatest magicians in the world, although many of them are, but what makes them great is that there's just a venue where you can do this stuff every night. You know, if you get up and perform every night, you're going to get good at stuff. Yeah. And here, and this is what makes Chicago different, almost everyone who works here can do close-up at a very high level. They can do stand-up magic. They can do bar magic. They can do Zoom shows. You know, they can do trade shows. People are so versatile here. It's unbelievable, the kind of stuff. You know, if they get a phone call to do any type of show, almost everyone can do whatever it is.
What a great feature of the community, and specifically of the lounge, like, because you have all these different spaces in the lounge for people to perform, you know, close up, the parlor, the 654 club, you know, you've got all these different like spaces for people to actually perform, that just by being a part of that venue for 6 months, a year and a half, whatever, you now, just because of requirement, can entertain in all of these different avenues, which is huge. And you mentioned Zoom as well, you know, which I'm sure everybody had to learn how to do as well.
Yeah, a week after everything shut down, uh, a week later, we immediately started doing stuff on Zoom. So we didn't wait, and we did shows for a long time, twice a week. We eventually went down to one time a week, but then the corporate stuff we started doing for Zoom, we were so busy all the time. So our core group of magicians, we were constantly doing Zoom shows, just
Wow.
over and over. Yeah.
You know, we talked about the lounge, we talked about the performing. I'd love to hear about it sort of from the magician side right now, the magic community, magic training. What's it like, not as a performer, but as a member of the Chicago magic community right now? What's that like in general right now?
You know what? It's things are starting to come back. But I think as the community, I think it's really, really great. When I was first came back into the city after being away at college, there were definitely factions, and they didn't necessarily, I wouldn't say get along, but I remember, I won't say anybody's name, there was a group of magicians who I promise you've heard of, talking about magic, and I happened to walk by their table, and they literally threw their bodies over the table so I couldn't see what they were doing. That really happened.
That is wild. That is a wild thing to happen. Don't look at my magic secrets.
Yeah. And these are people, legends. These are legendary people. So now it's not that way. The people we would think of as being really great in the city, it's just the division. There's no, and I think part of it is there's no central figure anymore. There's no Marlo. There's no Eugene. There's no Jay Marshall. There's just us, and, there's no leader. Everybody is just a part of it. I guess if there were any leaders of the Chicago magic community, I think it would be the magicians who work at the lounge. But the way our culture is at the lounge is everybody is welcome. We don't tolerate that, sort of. So magic is very different now because it's so open and everybody is invited to the party.
That's awesome.
And that was not always the way. Yeah. And people who perform here from out of town, they come here, and that's the one thing they remark on all the time. There's just everybody is there to help and support, and yeah.
That's very exciting. Right now is a really amazing moment for magic. I think a lot of communities, kind of went on pause with the pandemic, but a lot of communities have been trying to build up their own community with not only just spaces, like magic clubs are going out of style and magic venues are getting into style. And it's good because magicians are gathering around this concept of performing for lay people, whether it's around a table or on a stage, and that's what our communities are gathering about. We're no longer gathering about sitting and telling each other that our tricks are good. We're gathering about, hey, let's all go perform, and then we can go talk about it and have drinks and things like that.
Yep.
I think Chicago is a model city for that stuff right now, and I think it's a movement that's happening very, very fast.
I do too, and I've already seen the impact of it on other places around the country, around the United States. I'm not sure beyond the United States, but people would come here who have venues now, and some venues that have long established, but they would take pictures of everything, the lamp fixtures and the doors. And I was like, if you're going to copy something, copy the culture.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, you guys are trying to copy the carpet. And it's like, that's not what makes
carpet doesn't matter. The carpet doesn't matter.
I mean, nice carpet is nice, but what you want that would change things for you is if you copy the culture.
Yeah.
I hope people continue to do that because it is so positive.
That's so good to hear. I think everybody's looking up to Chicago and the magic scene that's going on there. Aside from the lounge, I know that we kind of bumped into each other because I know that you're working with David Copperfield to archive and tell stories of the African-American magicians in the United States. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
So yeah, David is really a cool guy. This museum he has, I know a lot of people think he just likes to acquire things and to own things. David, as you know, from having gone on the tour, he really loves this stuff. like really, really loves it. And I really, really love it. And for a very long time now, I've been helping him primarily by attending a lot of auctions, helping him secure things that he wants. He's also interested in telling the stories of magicians whose stories are typically left out of the big magic history books. And so I've been very lucky that he's been open to me helping him with those things. And one of the first projects that we worked on did center around African American magicians. And my job, seeing the cool thing about these projects is he's doing shows and he's doing his thing. I just do what I want and I bring back what I have. And if he's into it, it goes to the museum. So my job was to track down artifacts in the form of pictures, in some cases, video, audio recordings, posters, photos, props, things like that. And what's interesting about doing that specifically for some of these underrepresented populations is the value, the monetary value we place on their materials is really small. Like Houdini, you have a Houdini photo, that might be thousands of dollars, but I can take Frank Brent's, like his headshot. I have original headshots. No one else has them. You might sell them for $50. And the people who own these things, who aren't magicians, but grandchildren, close friends, they're just thrilled that someone like David Copperfield would want to memorialize them in a museum. So when we go to these people, so my job was to find the stuff, tell the people that we like these things to end up in the museum, contact David and say, David, these people have this, this, and that. David said, cool, well, let's call him on the phone. We call him on the phone. David would talk to them, explain more about what he's trying to do. And when it came time to get the materials and it's time to talk about what's fair in terms of price or whatever, these people say, just take it and just preserve it and keep it safe. So a lot of the things we were able to find, people just gave us. And when David gets it all together, it's going to really be awesome, not just for those magicians in particular, but for all of us. All those stories are our stories. They're your stories. They're my stories. They're everyone's stories. So I'm thrilled that David lets me help him out from time to time. And I'm thrilled that he cares enough to do it.
Were there any stories or discoveries or artifacts or anything that specifically either stuck with you or was just like something awesome that you learned that, you can give us a sneak peek, before it ends up, in the museum? Anything that really stuck out to you or a story that you really like?
Yeah, there are two things that stuck out to me. Pete Sanders is a magician who was born in 1933 in Chicago. Eventually moved to Memphis, Tennessee. But Guy Jarrett, when he met him at 16, he wanted to make him into a star. Jarrett worked with Thurston and numerous other magicians, but he thought he could take this black kid from Chicago and make him a star. And Pete Sanders, even as a teenager, had been financially successful enough that he had his own car. And so he didn't go with Jared because Jared, he said, I have a car and this guy is walking. Why did I put my career in his hands? And he didn't do it. But Pete Sanders went on to become very successful, hugely successful, but working in the Black community, specifically Black schools raising money for underfunded Black schools. So his story didn't make it out in the same way that Howard Thurston's did or John Mulholland's did. These are his contemporaries, but he was there and did incredible things. And one of the things we found was an audio recording of Pete Sanders that I know for a fact no one else has. That exists.
Wow.
Yes, amazing, amazing stuff. And then one other thing that we found with this particular project, there's a woman named Ellen Armstrong who now is getting quite a bit of attention within the magic world. There's a stamp of Ellen Armstrong now, U.S. postal stamp, but her father was probably the greatest Black magician of his time, born in 1889 or between 1886 and 1889. But they had a show at the height of his popularity that was worth $1 million. So $1 million in 1912 was a lot of money, in costumes and props. And when he died, Ellen Armstrong took over the show. And she was the only Black woman in the history of magic to have her own touring show. And we found a pristine poster of hers that was just gorgeous. Just gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. And David's got that too now. And and there's other things. We did that for maybe a year or two, and working on new stuff all the time. And again, David, I expressed an interest in him. In speaking with him, I get a glimpse of what he's into. And having worked with him so long during these auctions, I have a sense of what he's into. So when I find something that I'm just as into, I'll say, why don't you let me help? And he's like, do your thing, Ben, just go. And then I go and do my thing. But to have the stamp of approval to do these things from David Copperfield, when I go to people and say, listen, I'm representing this, they are open. Yeah. And what's going to happen is we're all going to be dead one day, and all these stories will be preserved in that museum, and they will never die. And that's what makes it worth it.
It's amazing. A lot of the things that we're talking about, including, first of all, that museum, any sort of work to get things there, but also the lounge and the magic communities and, Chicago style magic. A lot of what we're talking about is legacy. That's really one of the messages that we're talking about here is, building something that really adds to the magic legacy. And whether that's preserving something, whether that's, continuing the style of magic in a community, whether that's building a community or actual physical infrastructure, a lot of the things that you've done are in, in an effort towards legacy and towards things to be lasting a long time.
Yeah. Well, I give tours of this place all the time because we have a lot of magicians who visit from far away, and I want to take them around. And there was a magician here just a couple of days ago. Amanda Nepo?
Yep, of course.
Yeah, she was just here. She was here yesterday. And one thing I say to her, but I say this to everybody, is in a space like this, the past, the present, and the future all come together. Because we're only here because of all the people that came before, and the work that we do here is for those yet to come. And that's just how it is. And David's Museum is that. Every magic show you see is that. That's innate in magic. There's this thing in it that calls to the past, supports the present, and invest in the future. It's just built into it, So, because you saw a magician when you were a kid, or you saw a magic trick right? And here you are. And you work through discourse and magic and all the other things you do. People come into contact with that material, and it pushes them forward too. So it's so cool.
We're talking about magic. We're talking about legacy. I want to talk about two things recently that you've done or that are coming up soon, which is, you were on the most recent or the previous season of Fool Us, as well as shooting, a Masters of Illusion, which has not yet aired. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that. Can you talk a little bit about these processes, going on these shows, shooting some magic, some of the stuff that you've been doing for a while? Can you talk a little bit about this?
Oh, absolutely. So Fool Us was a really pleasant surprise. I, just been going about my life, living my life. And I got an email one day saying, we would love for you to send in the video. We would really think that would be fun. So I sent the video in, expecting it to go nowhere. And I got invited to do the show. Wow. And I went on the show, and the process, so I'm invited to do the show. And this is during the pandemic. So I'm performing for the producers and writers through Zoom, because that's how they help get you ready for the show when it records. So you have a couple of meetings. And the one thing that I did that was, I think, smart is I involved other people in the process. So I knew how to do my card trick, but I had an acting coach. I had someone who helped pick out my clothing. And I worked with all those people to get ready to do this. And I'm so happy I did, because when I was in Vegas and I walked out on the stage and Penn and Teller are there, and the cameras are there and all that, all the preparation just kicked in. So I wasn't really nervous. I did exactly what I wanted to do, and that was pretty cool. That was pretty cool. And soon we'll put it on YouTube. And Penn and Teller were very nice. Everyone with their operation, super, super nice. But that was, like I said, it was a great surprise. Never in a million years would I have gone out for that on my own. So to have that sort of come to me and to have had such a great experience was really, really, really great. So
that's awesome. Fun. And tell us a little bit about Masters of Illusion, if you can. I know I see everybody just finished sort of shooting recently, but that's also sort of another great epic stage for Magic.
Yeah. And, people are already posting photos and things from us. So I was like, I don't do that. I was performing at the Magic Castle in February. After my first night, things went really well. And the next day, I got a call from Gabe Blackstone saying, I heard things went well. Would you like to be on our TV show? Which, by the way, was shooting the next week. So I said, okay. And, I didn't take a whole lot of stuff with me to California. I had to go get new clothes. I had to go because they wanted different looks. And they appeal to a certain type of demographic. So it wasn't appropriate to be in a full-on suit. They wanted, they're trying to appeal to like cool, hip, young, fresh, blah, blah, blah. But it was great. Penn and Teller, because of there's a lot of secrets in that show. Like, you can't let people know you're on the show before it's announced. You can't let people know if you fooled them or not. Matt, and they even try and keep a secret from you as a contestant who the other performers are. So you don't even know. Everything's a big secret. And you can't move throughout that space without an escort. So they really make sure you don't know too much. Masters of Illusion, it was just open. So you're walking around, you see all the other people on the show. You have freedom to interact with the crew. So I really learned a lot about just being in that environment and how it worked. The one thing I thought was interesting is time is so important. Like, things have to happen at a certain time. So this idea of going there and warming up or doing a couple of practice runs before you film, you got to be ready to go, and when it's time to do it, you better do it right, because there may not be a take two. And that was education.
It's such an exciting time. We're talking about performing in, there's communities like the Chicago community, all these different venues we're talking about. And then also television, things like America's Got Talent, Masters of Illusions, Penn and Teller's Fool Us. This is such a great moment to be a fan of Magic, to be a performer. There's so many great venues and avenues to perform in. It's really such an amazing moment right now, and especially with virtual as well. We've got everything. You can perform in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah. And what's great about that is you can do what you do and what you're passionate about. If you don't want to do trade shows, you can do virtual shows, or you can do hit shows. You can really explore the parts of Magic that you want to explore, because so many avenues are now open that may not have been open before.
I love it, and I couldn't agree more. Ben, we are getting towards the end of the episode, and every episode has basically some wrap-up questions that we ask to each and every guest. Okay. I'm going to ask them with you right now. Don't worry, they're not like rapid fire questions. You can take as much time as you need. But the first one is about is the endless chain. So in order to keep the podcast going on for eternity, each guest is asked to recommend another guest that would be a great feature on this show. Who would be a good guest on this podcast that you can recommend?
A great guest on this podcast, if you have not spoken to Rachel Wax.
No, have not yet. That's actually perfect.
She is great, and I will gladly send you her information.
That would be perfect. No one ever gets a name that I haven't interviewed on the first try. That's why I was so excited. That was a good celebration. That's wonderful. The next one is a question about modern magic. So what's one thing going on in the world of magic right now that you like, and one thing going on in the world of magic right now that you don't like?
One thing that's going on in magic that I really like is that more and more is becoming more and more diverse. You see it's getting to the point now where it's not noteworthy that someone who's a magician is also a woman. It's like it's starting not to be a thing. And I love that. I love that it's just becoming more democratic and more diverse, and it's great.
It's amazing. And what's one thing you don't like in the world of magic right now?
One thing I don't like in the world of magic is still this drive that I see behind a lot of things for attention for the sake of attention, or fame for the sake of fame. I see a lot of people looking or asking what they can get from magic and not what they can give to it. So, I would love to just see people serve magic more. And, but lots of people do, it's not a perfect world, but I would like to see even more of that. I think it would be great.
I think that's a great critique about the world of magic, and maybe an opportunity for everybody to give and support, the world of magic more. I think that's awesome. The last thing is the take home point. We've been talking about magic for an hour plus now, a ton of different things we've spoken about. If people are going to think back to this moment, think back to this episode and remember one thing that's maybe going to be the most important to them, their magic career, their life, whatever it is, what should the one thing be that we spoke about that you think people shouldn't forget?
One thing I think people should focus on is to really look for ways in which they can express who they are truly through their magic. If you do that, I think you will stand out. People will see you and want more and more and more if you can do that.
I think that's great advice. Figure out ways to express who you are, and you will stand out. You will get on the biggest stages. Some of these stages we're talking about, like the castle and the lounge and Fool Us and, all these different places stand out by clutching onto your uniqueness, to what makes you special. The last thing is plugs. Where can people find you? Where can people learn some of your stuff? I know you have a Penguin Live coming up shortly. Where can people learn more about your magic?
They can go to my Instagram, which is @BarnesMagic. I will be doing a Penguin Live lecture real soon. It's all the secrets I swore never to reveal. They will be revealed. I'm going to, at some point this year, do House of Cards, and I'll very likely be back at the Magic Castle. So you just have to keep an eye out, and then I'll be at the Magic Lounge a lot. And I'll be performing at the Magic Lounge in the 654 Club, but also on stage in September. So check out the website if you're going to be in the city, and I would love to see you.
Well, there you have it. I hope you liked the episode, and I hope, of course, that you learned something. Please, number one, go check out the Chicago Magic Lounge. I laughed when I said that because you should probably already know what that is. But if you didn't, or you live near Chicago, or you're going to be near Chicago, then go to the lounge. It is beautiful, and they have just the best magicians ever there all the time. As you heard, number two, you now know, by the way, how to get on the lineup at the lounge and what types of magic and what you need to do. Number three, if you like this episode, please share it, tell a friend. It means the world. It's the only way that more people learn about this podcast. And number four, thanks for being here, and I'll see you next Thursday. Number five, peace.